Well, the dramatic conclusions now in Hudgells' statement on behalf of many of the convicted sub-postmasters are hard to disagree with and paint a picture of an institution of the post office once trusted to be absolutely in tatters with no way to know whether it's possible to recover it. In the words of the KC speaking here, the post office knew the price of everything and the value of nothing as communities were destroyed, along with sub-postmasters and the families at the heart of the post office scandal. Let's jump into the inquiry.
For centuries, the post office was a cornerstone of public service in this country. It's been said many times, but it really was one of the United Kingdom's most trusted institutions. Integrated close to the heart of every community in our cities, our towns, and our villages. It was trusted with our mail, trusted with our savings, our pensions, and for many, our livelihoods. But those images are now long gone. The future of both post office and Fujitsu was intrinsically linked to the success of Horizon. Horizon simply could not and would not be allowed to fail. We saw that in phase 2, and we see it in phase 4. Postmasters were easy targets to point to persecute, to prosecute, and to pursue for apparent losses. And, by contrast, Horizon could not and would not fail. This false narrative hid, for too many years, a disastrous reality that allowed the post office to prosecute a large number of its own people and to bankrupt many more, and to pursue hundreds of thousands of pounds in false recoveries in reliance on false data. And yet, the false narrative, in some places, continues to run. In their evidence to this inquiry, some post office witnesses have continued to assert their enduring belief that postmasters are guilty, second-guessing the courts of appeal, for example, Andrew Wise and Gary Thomas, and to question if Horizon lacked integrity, Susan Harding. Where had the money gone? Asked postmasters with ever-increasing desperation. This was an obvious question that it appears the post office could not or would not ask, let alone answer. In none of the detailed case studies explored by the inquiry was there any concrete evidence of serious investigative effort on the part of the post office to prove a loss beyond Horizon. There was no money found secreted away in postmasters' bank accounts or in stuffed mattresses. Yet the post office and Fujitsu did not and or would not hear any suggestion that Horizon was at fault. The inquiry has heard that the volume and value of these recoveries were closely monitored by the post office each year. Where did that money go? Did it simply appear on the post office's bottom line? So the inquiry must consider whether staff, executives and senior managers at the post office and Fujitsu were motivated by commercial interest to the detriment of justice. The inquiry must consider whether those responsible for this scandal in the post office, at Fujitsu and in government did not, could not or would not hear any warning that Horizon lacked integrity because their ears were stuffed with cash. Were they too busy thinking about wealth in purely monetary terms that they ignored or disregarded the wealth of community? Those communities such as South Warnborough, where Jo Hamilton had her post office, Guyowyn, where Noel Thomas had his, Duckingfield, where Della Robinson had her post office. Those communities relied on the post office. Jo Hamilton kept the pension cards and PIN numbers of the elderly residents in a drawer at her branch so that she could look after them. All of that was something you couldn't put a price on, but which was incredibly valuable. Post office didn't and or wouldn't see the wealth in that. They ignored or disregarded the wealth of reputation. They not only trashed the reputations of the postmasters, whom they dragged through the courts and imprisoned and bankrupted. By doing so, through this massive miscarriage of justice, they trashed the reputation of the post office as well, something you couldn't put a price on, but which was incredibly valuable. They saw wealth as just monetary wealth, and as the old phrase goes, they knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. It can take centuries to build something valuable. It only takes a relatively short time to seriously undermine it. And so to move to our conclusions, we are, sir, as ever, grateful for the opportunity to make these submissions today on behalf of each of the postmasters we represent. While many of their stories have become part of the national narrative. Many of them and their families remain intensely private people, irreparably damaged by their experiences at the hands of the post office. For a great many postmasters, it has taken a lot for them to be able to watch these proceedings, to see themselves in the spotlight. The loss and the stigma that postmasters have lived with for decades does not disappear easily. They remain grateful for the work of the inquiry so far, not only in further unearthing the dirty, difficult truth behind this scandal, but in pressing the post office and government on their commitment to provide prompt, full and fair compensation, to try and ensure that offers that are made to them are not, in the very recent words of Alan Bates, derisory, offensive, and after all this time, yes, cruel. And this phase highlights that the individual decision makers who failed in their responsibilities as prosecutors must be under a different but similarly bright spotlight, as must the shared failures of governance which lie behind this scandal. Anything less would neglect to ensure that lessons are learned for the future about the dangers which lie in the confluence of commercial interest, individual ambition, and criminal injustice. Cost of this scandal includes what may be irreparable damage to the post office in our community consciousness. The next stages of this inquiry will focus further on the shared financial responsibility for redress owed not only by post office and the public purse, but by Fujitsu. Those we represent do not wish to see any constructive steps to compensate all postmasters, await any such attribution of responsibility as may follow the evidence in this inquiry. Tragically, postmasters continue to die before any offer of proper, full and final compensation. Others continue to grapple with delays in administration, which is continuing their trauma and delaying yet further their capacity to move on and enjoy the rest of their lives. Fujitsu accepts a moral responsibility to share the load, but it is vague about precisely what this means. And we suggest that as it goes forward, the inquiry might consider the extent of any agreement reached between government, post office and Fujitsu as to any legal cause of action arising, their timing, and whether any such arrangements may have informed the approach to the GLO and any strategic steps since, including decisions on compensation. While Fujitsu has voluntarily committed, with seeming fanfare, to refrain from bids for further public work while the inquiry continues, the inquiry may wish to examine the increasing commercial value and the corresponding cost to the public purse of the relationship between Fujitsu and government over the life of Horizon. There are lessons to be learned in the relationship between government and Fujitsu developed on the back of Horizon. This may not only help explain why Horizon was defended for so long, but may inform the inquiry's recommendations for the future conduct of public-private contracting. Moreover, those we represent expect to see criminal prosecution pursued where the evidence warrants it. We welcome the decision of the Chair to provide careful, appropriate warnings against self-incrimination to a number of witnesses. The Phase 4 transcripts provide evidence which, at the very least, justifies rigorous investigation of possible offending in a number of cases. We note that the Metropolitan Police Service is a core participant, and we understand they are monitoring these proceedings. The integrity of any possible prosecution ought to be closely guarded. It would be a devastating result for those we represent and for the public interest should any person liable to investigation, prosecution and conviction escape or unnecessarily delay trial for procedural reasons, no matter how spurious. The evidence in Phase 4 provides a flavour of what is to come in Phases 5 and 6. We ask that it includes, firstly, why, if not for profit and commercial interest, did the Post Office continue to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the growing evidence of Horizon's flaws? Just how was it allowed to do so in the face of the involvement of Parliament and of independent reviews conducted by Second Sight, Deloitte and individual legal experts? Why did Fujitsu continue, as it appears they did, to support the stock line that Horizon was robust? And what role was played by government, including the government representation on the Post Office board? Additionally, the treatment of Second Sight will be a significant issue for Phase 5. There is now concrete evidence that Post Office management rejected any question of closer scrutiny and independent interrogation of Horizon as early as 2005. Each ignored opportunity to interrogate Horizon represents years lost to many of our clients. For others, an opportunity missed could have prevented their loss and their pain entirely. Justice delayed in this case truly was justice denied. And just as no rational person could believe that government and Parliament were in the dark about the Post Office scandal before the airing of Mr. Bates by ITV, the board and the Post Office were not and cannot have been uninformed of concerns about the flaws in Horizon and the shortcomings of their own prosecutorial conduct until the conclusion of the GLO. Exploring and determining the extent of responsibility for the continued, seemingly determined failure to acknowledge the devastating flaws both in Horizon and in the Post Office's approach to prosecution is critical for this inquiry, central to our clients' true understanding of what happened to them, and essential before lessons can truly be learned for the future. And as ever, sir, we and those we represent will do all we can to assist the inquiry in finding out those things.
Well, what can you really say after that? I mean, some fantastic conclusions drawn there by these solicitors for many of the convicted sub-postmasters, which just lays bare not only the tragedy that sub-postmasters have been put through, but also the damage to communities and the destruction of the post office's reputation and the public's trust in it that could well turn out to be irretrievable. How they return from this at the moment, it's hard to see a path through for them, but it's very, 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 very clear that this is the start of a process that obviously needs to trigger other processes to ensure that the sub-postmasters get the full and complete justice and truth that they've waited so long for, that they thoroughly deserve, and how faith is restored in the public institutions that have failed them so badly.
Mr. Maloney, thank you very much for your submissions. Those of you who follow the inquiry will know that occasionally I congratulate Mr. Maloney for the accuracy of his predictions as to the length of his submissions. On this occasion, he was within 2 or 3 minutes of his prediction, and that is a mark of excellent advocacy, if I may say so.